I was cutting into a piece of roast chicken when my sister-in-law suddenly pushed her chair back and stood up. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Rachel's voice shook as she pointed directly at me across the dinner table. "I can't keep lying anymore," she said. Her mother frowned. Her father looked confused. Lisa, my wife, turned slowly toward her sister. Rachel swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." The room went silent. No one spoke. Then Rachel's finger lifted again. And pointed straight at me. "And the baby is his." For a moment I didn't understand what she had just said. Then Lisa's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "What?" she whispered. Rachel started crying. Loud. Shaking. Convincing. "It happened at the lake house in July," she said through tears. "He came into my room at night." My chest tightened. "That never happened," I said quietly. But no one was looking at Rachel anymore. They were all staring at me. Her father stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the wooden floor. "Get out of my house." Lisa's face had gone pale. "David," she whispered. Rachel sobbed harder. "He told me to stay quiet. He said no one would believe me." Her mother rushed to hold her. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. Because in that moment something inside my head went completely still. And I realized something very important. Rachel wasn't panicking. She was performing. Which meant this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. And the worst part? Everyone believed her. My wife. Her parents. Everyone. I stayed silent. And I waited. Because I knew something they didn't. And sooner or later. The truth always shows itself. But before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Your support really helps this channel grow. That was the moment everything began to fall apart. My name is David. And 6 years ago I married the woman I thought I would grow old with. Lisa Monroe. We met in a small bookstore in Portland. She was standing in the poetry section holding a book of Pablo Neruda. I was a high school history teacher looking for lesson plans. We started talking. Then we got coffee. 3 hours later the cafe was closing and we were still sitting there. Laughing. Lisa had this quiet warmth about her. The kind that made people feel safe. Her family was close. Very close. Sunday dinners every week. Birthdays together. Holidays together. When we got married, I thought I had gained a second family. At least. That's what I believed. Rachel was Lisa's younger sister. 3 years younger. Nursing student. Quiet. A little shy. At least that's how she seemed. We never had any problems. No strange conversations. No awkward moments. Nothing. Which made what happened at that dinner completely insane. Because according to Rachel, I had somehow snuck into her bedroom months earlier. And gotten her pregnant. The accusation spread through the house like gasoline hitting a fire. Lisa's father pushed his chair back. "You heard me," he said again. "Get out." Lisa was staring at the floor. She wouldn't look at me. "Lisa," I said quietly. "Tell them this is crazy." She still didn't look up. Rachel sobbed louder. "He's been texting me for months," she cried. "Telling me to keep quiet." That was when I knew something was very wrong. Because I had never sent Rachel a single message. Not one. Lisa's mother glared at me like I was something disgusting. "You predator." The word hit harder than the accusation. I stood up slowly. "Lisa," I said again. "Nothing." Her father stepped toward me. "If you know what's good for you, you'll walk out of this house right now. And that was exactly what I did. I grabbed my jacket, walked to the door, and stepped outside into the cold night. Behind me I could still hear Rachel crying. And Lisa. Still silent. At that moment I had already lost my wife, my home, and my reputation. All in less than 60 seconds. But what they didn't realize was that Rachel had made one small mistake. A mistake that would eventually destroy everything she had just built. And I had already started noticing it. I was cutting into a piece of roast chicken when my sister-in-law suddenly pushed her chair back and stood up. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Rachel's voice shook as she pointed directly at me across the dinner table. "I can't keep lying anymore," she said. Her mother frowned. Her father looked confused. Lisa, my wife, turned slowly toward her sister. Rachel swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." The room went silent. No one spoke. Then Rachel's finger lifted again. And pointed straight at me. "And the baby is his." For a moment I didn't understand what she had just said. Then Lisa's glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "What?" she whispered. Rachel started crying. Loud. Shaking. Convincing. "It happened at the lake house in July," she said through tears. "He came into my room at night." My chest tightened. "That never happened," I said quietly. But no one was looking at Rachel anymore. They were all staring at me. Her father stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the wooden floor. "Get out of my house." Lisa's face had gone pale. "David," she whispered. Rachel sobbed harder. "He told me to stay quiet. He said no one would believe me." Her mother rushed to hold her. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. Because in that moment something inside my head went completely still. And I realized something very important. Rachel wasn't panicking. She was performing. Which meant this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. And the worst part? Everyone believed her. My wife. Her parents. Everyone. I stayed silent. And I waited. Because I knew something they didn't. And sooner or later, the truth always shows itself. But before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Your support really helps this channel grow. That was the moment everything began to fall apart. My name is David. And 6 years ago I married the woman I thought I would grow old with. Lisa Monroe. We met in a small bookstore in Portland. She was standing in the poetry section holding a book of Pablo Neruda. I was a high school history teacher looking for lesson plans. We started talking. Then we got coffee. 3 hours later the cafe was closing and we were still sitting there. Laughing. Lisa had this quiet warmth about her. The kind that made people feel safe. Her family was close. Very close. Sunday dinners every week. Birthdays together. Holidays together. When we got married, I thought I had gained a second family. At least. That's what I believed. Rachel was Lisa's younger sister. 3 years younger. Nursing student. Quiet. A little shy. At least that's how she seemed. We never had any problems. No strange conversations. No awkward moments. Nothing. Which made what happened at that dinner completely insane. Because according to Rachel, I had somehow snuck into her bedroom months earlier. And gotten her pregnant. The accusation spread through the house like gasoline hitting a fire. Lisa's father pushed his chair back. "You heard me," he said again. "Get out." Lisa was staring at the floor. She wouldn't look at me. Lisa, I said quietly. Tell them this is crazy. She still didn't look up. Rachel sobbed louder. He's been texting me for months, she cried. Telling me to keep quiet. That was when I knew something was very wrong. Because I had never sent Rachel a single message. Not one. Lisa's mother glared at me like I was something disgusting. You predator. The word hit harder than the accusation. I stood up slowly. Lisa, I said again. Nothing. Her father stepped toward me. If you know what's good for you, you'll walk out of this house right now. And that was exactly what I did. I grabbed my jacket. Walked to the door. And stepped outside into the cold night. Behind me I could still hear Rachel crying. And Lisa. Still silent. At that moment I had already lost my wife. My home. And my reputation. All in less than 60 seconds. But what they didn't realize was that Rachel had made one small mistake. A mistake that would eventually destroy everything she had just built. And I had already started noticing it. I drove for almost an hour before I realized I had no idea where I was going. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear. From disbelief. 6 years of marriage. And my wife hadn't said a single word to defend me. Not one. I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap roadside motel just after midnight. The kind with flickering neon lights and faded paint. Motel 6. The receptionist barely looked up when I checked in. Room 214. I walked inside and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence in that room felt heavy. My phone buzzed. Lisa. For a second I thought she was calling. She wasn't. Just a message. Don't contact me. Don't contact my family. I need time to think. That was it. No questions. No doubt. Just distance. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. Lisa, you know I would never do that. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I called her mother next. She answered on the first ring. What do you want? She snapped. I just want to explain. You've done enough explaining, she cut me off. Her voice turned cold. If you come near Rachel again, we're calling the police. The line went dead. A few seconds later another message arrived. This one from Lisa's father. If you know what's good for you, disappear. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. Rachel was lying. That much I knew. But lies like that don't appear out of nowhere. People lie for a reason. Fear. Money. Protection. Or pressure. Which meant someone had helped her. Or convinced her. Or forced her. And one person kept coming back into my mind. Kyle. Rachel's boyfriend. He had been sitting right next to her during dinner. Quiet. Silent. Not a single word when she accused me. Not angry. Not shocked. Just staring at his plate. That wasn't the reaction of a boyfriend hearing that his girlfriend had slept with another man. Something about that bothered me. A lot. I opened my laptop. If Rachel was claiming I'd been texting her for months, then the first thing I needed to do was prove that was impossible. I downloaded my entire phone record from my carrier. Every call. Every text. Every number. Then I searched for Rachel. Nothing. Not a single message. Not a single call. Zero contact. I saved the file. Then I checked something else. My Google Maps location history. I rarely used it. But it was always running quietly in the background. Tracking everywhere my phone had been. Rachel had mentioned something very specific at dinner. The lake house. July. Middle of the night. I pulled up the dates. July 12th. July 13th. July 14th. The weekend we were all at Lisa's parents' lake house. My phone had barely moved. 2 trips. One to the dock. One to the grocery store with Lisa. That was it. No late-night walks. No visits to Rachel's room. No wandering around the house. I took screenshots. Saved them. Created a folder on my desktop. Then I leaned back in the chair. Rachel had said something else too. Something very specific. He came to my room. Which meant she expected people to believe we were alone. But according to the data, that never happened. Still, something didn't add up. Because Rachel had sounded confident. Too confident. Almost like she had rehearsed the story. And that meant she probably wasn't acting alone. I opened Facebook. Typed Kyle Brennan. His profile appeared immediately. 22. Worked at a car dealership. Relationship status, in a relationship with Rachel Monroe. His most recent post was from 2 days ago. A picture of him and Rachel sitting in a restaurant booth. Smiling. His arm around her shoulders. That wasn't strange. But something about it bothered me. Because if Rachel had really slept with me months ago, Kyle should have been furious. Humiliated. Gone. But he wasn't. They looked normal. Happy even. I scrolled further back. Then I found something interesting. An older post from August. Rachel was tagged in it. Kyle had written. Big changes coming. The comments were full of heart emojis. Friends asking if they were getting engaged. Rachel replied to one of them. Not yet. Something even better. Something better than engagement. I stared at that line for a long time. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Text message. 3 words. Stop digging now. My stomach tightened. Then a second message appeared. This is your only warning. I read it twice. Whoever sent it knew exactly what I was doing. Which meant 2 things. First, someone was watching. And second, I was getting close to something they didn't want me to find. Most people would have stopped right there. Closed the laptop. Tried to disappear. But I wasn't most people. Because the moment Rachel stood up at that dinner table, she didn't just accuse me. She destroyed my life. My marriage. My reputation. And now someone was trying to scare me into silence. I took a screenshot of the message. Added it to the evidence folder. Then I did the one thing that would make this situation much more dangerous for the people who had started it. The next morning, I called a lawyer. And that decision was about to change everything. The lawyer's office was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building downtown. Small brass sign on the door. Paul Hendricks, Family Law and Civil Litigation. Nothing fancy. But the reviews online were very clear. He wins. Paul Hendricks was in his early 50s. Gray hair. Sharp eyes. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I told him everything. The dinner. The accusation. The messages. Rachel's story. Lisa leaving me. Her father threatening me. The warning text. He didn't interrupt once. Just took notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. First question, he said calmly. Did you sleep with her? No. He studied my face for a few seconds. Then nodded. Good, he said. That makes this much easier. I blinked. Easier? Yes, Paul said. Because if you're telling the truth, then someone has committed serious defamation. He tapped his pen on the desk. And possibly fraud. That word caught my attention. Fraud? Pregnancy claims sometimes involve money, he explained. Child support, settlements, inheritance manipulation, people do strange things when money is involved. I frowned. Rachel's family wasn't rich. Neither was I. I was a teacher. Lisa worked as a librarian. There was no fortune here. Paul seemed to read my thoughts. This isn't always about wealth, he said. Sometimes it's about avoiding consequences. He leaned forward. Do you have proof you weren't in contact with her? I opened my laptop and showed him everything. Phone records. Call logs. Location history. Screenshots. He looked through the files carefully. Slowly. Methodically. Then he nodded again. This is good. But it's defensive evidence. What does that mean? I asked. It proves you didn't contact her, he said. But it doesn't prove she lied. He closed the laptop. What we need is motive. Why would she accuse you? Fear. Money. Protection. Or pressure. There was that word again. Pressure. Kyle's face flashed in my mind. Paul must have noticed. Someone comes to mind, he asked. Her boyfriend, I said. Kyle. Paul wrote the name down. Tell me about him. I explained what little I knew. Car dealership job. Young. Quiet. From a struggling family. Paul listened carefully. Then asked a simple question. Did he react when she accused you? No. That's interesting, Paul said. Why? Because most men would react strongly to hearing their girlfriend slept with another man. He paused. But if he already knew the story? My stomach tightened. You think he helped her? Paul shrugged slightly. I think there's more to this than a random accusation. He stood up and walked to the window. Here's what we're going to do. We investigate. How? I asked. You don't. He smiled faintly. I do. He turned back toward me. If Rachel is lying, she has a reason. And reasons leave evidence. He walked back to his desk. This will cost money. And it will take time. How much time? I asked. A few weeks. Maybe less if we get lucky. I nodded. I'll do it. Paul didn't hesitate. Good. He extended his hand. Because if what you're telling me is true. He shook my hand firmly. Then someone just made a very expensive mistake. A week passed. The longest week of my life. Lisa never called. Her family blocked me everywhere. Even some of our mutual friends stopped responding. Rumors were spreading. I could feel it. Through silence. Through cold looks. Through messages that never came. Rachel's story was working. And every day that passed, the lie was becoming truth in people's minds. Then my phone rang. Paul. I found something, he said. I sat up straight. What? Rachel filed paperwork with the state 2 weeks before that dinner. For what? Medical assistance. For pregnancy. That made sense. But then he added something that made my stomach drop. She listed the father as unknown. Unknown. I repeated. Yes. Not you. Not anyone. I frowned. Then why accuse me? That's the interesting part, Paul said. Originally she wasn't planning to name a father. Something changed. What changed? I asked. That's what we're about to find out. There was a pause. There's more, Paul said. Her boyfriend Kyle. What about him? He has a sealed juvenile record. My grip tightened around the phone. What kind of record? Assault. Pled down to a lesser charge. Paul continued. His family isn't doing well financially. Single mother. 3 younger brothers. Debt. I sat back slowly. You think this is about money? Paul sighed softly. I think this is about something. And money is usually a very good guess. I was about to respond when another call came through. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Hello. A woman's voice spoke calmly. Mr. Carver? Yes. This is Susan Park from St. Vincent's Hospital. My stomach tightened. What about it? We need you to come in today. It's regarding Rachel Monroe. My heart skipped. Is she okay? She's stable, the woman said. But there's something you need to know. What kind of something? There was a brief pause. I can't discuss it over the phone. Her tone became firmer. But it's urgent. Can you come in today? I looked at the clock. 11:17 a.m. Yes. What time? 2 o'clock. She added one more sentence before hanging up. Please come alone. I sat in the hospital parking lot for 10 minutes before walking inside. Something about this felt wrong. Or maybe right. I didn't know yet. But deep down, I had the strange feeling that whatever I was about to hear was going to break Rachel's story completely. And when it did, everything would start collapsing. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and quiet panic. I checked in at the front desk and gave my name. The receptionist typed something into her computer. Then she looked up. Someone will come get you, Mr. Carver. I sat down in the waiting area. Every minute felt longer than the last. I kept replaying that dinner in my head. Rachel's voice. Her tears. Lisa looking at the floor. Her father telling me to get out. The accusation had spread like poison. And once people believe something like that, it never fully disappears. Even if the truth comes out later. 10 minutes passed. Then a woman in medical scrubs approached me. Mid-40s. Professional. Clipboard in her hand. Mr. Carver? Yes. I'm Susan Park. She motioned for me to follow her. We walked down a quiet hallway and into a small office. She closed the door behind us. Please sit. I sat. My heart was beating harder now. Susan glanced down at her clipboard. Then back at me. Rachel Monroe listed you as the father of her child during her intake paperwork. I know, I said. She told everyone. Susan studied my face carefully. Yes, we are aware of that. She paused. We ran standard prenatal blood work yesterday. Blood type testing is part of that process. I didn't understand where this was going. And? I asked. Susan flipped a page on the clipboard. There were irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Rachel's blood type is O positive. I nodded slowly. That doesn't mean anything by itself. No, she agreed. But she listed you as the father. She looked up. We need the father's blood type for medical records. I blinked. Mine. Yes. What is your blood type, Mr. Carver? AB negative. She wrote it down. Then looked up again. And your wife? Lisa? Yes. A positive. Susan set the clipboard down. Mr. Carver, the fetus has B positive blood type. I stared at her. For a moment I didn't understand. Then the realization hit me. Hard. What does that mean? Her voice remained calm. It means the biological father cannot be you. The room felt smaller. Hotter. You're sure? Yes. Genetically impossible. My mind started racing. All those accusations. The screaming. Lisa leaving me. Her parents calling me a predator. And the whole time. Science said it couldn't even be true. Does Rachel know this? I asked. Not yet. Susan glanced at the chart. She will be informed at her next appointment. When? Tomorrow morning. I sat there for a moment. Trying to process it. The lie was already collapsing. And Rachel didn't even know it yet. What happens when you tell her? I asked. She'll have to update the father information on the record. Susan paused. And the medical staff will ask questions. I nodded slowly. A lot of questions. And Rachel would have no answers. I stood up. Can I get documentation of this? Susan hesitated for a second. Once the official lab results are filed, yes. That should be tomorrow afternoon. That's fine, I said. Thank you. She walked me back to the hallway. Mr. Carver. I stopped. Yes. Her voice softened slightly. I've worked in prenatal care for 15 years. I've seen a lot of complicated family situations. She studied my face. But accusations like the one you described. She shook her head. They don't usually end well for the person who made them. I nodded. Then I walked out of the hospital. The air outside felt colder. Sharper. But for the first time since that dinner. I could breathe. I pulled out my phone. Called Paul. He answered immediately. Well. They ran blood tests. And. The baby has B positive blood type. Silence. Then Paul exhaled slowly. And you're AB negative. Yes. He chuckled softly. That's perfect. Perfect? I asked. From a legal standpoint? Yes. Why? Because blood type incompatibility is strong preliminary evidence. And once we add DNA testing later. His voice hardened. Rachel's story collapses completely. I leaned against my car. She finds out tomorrow. Paul paused. Good. Let her sit with it. What do you mean? Don't contact her. Don't contact your wife. Let the truth start spreading on its own. And if it doesn't? Paul's answer came quickly. Then we bring the truth to them. With interest. I ended the call and sat in my car for a long time. Rachel thought she had control of the story. But she didn't. Because in less than 24 hours, she would discover something that made her entire lie impossible. And when that happened, the people who turned their backs on me would finally have to ask themselves one question. If David isn't the father, then who is? But the answer to that question was going to cause even bigger problems than Rachel expected. The next morning felt longer than the entire week before it. I woke up early. Too early. The motel room looked exactly the same. Gray walls. Buzzing fluorescent light. A coffee machine that made something barely drinkable. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time since that dinner, the panic was gone. In its place was something colder. Patience. Rachel still believed her lie was safe. By noon, that illusion would be gone. I checked my phone every few minutes. Nothing. No messages. No missed calls. Just silence. At 12:47 p.m. my phone finally rang. Lisa. I stared at the screen for 2 seconds before answering. Hello. Her voice was quiet. Shaking. David. I didn't respond. She continued. Rachel just called me. I leaned back in the chair. From the hospital? Yes. She was screaming, Lisa said. They told her the baby's blood type. I stayed silent. They said you can't be the father. Her voice cracked on the last word. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she whispered. David. I don't understand. I looked out the motel window. Rain was starting to fall. She said you came to her room at the lake house, Lisa continued. She knew details. What details? I asked calmly. Lisa hesitated. She said you wore a gray shirt that night. I closed my eyes for a second. I wore a white one. Lisa didn't answer. She said you kissed her by the dock. I never went to the dock alone. Silence again. Then she asked the question that had finally started forming in her mind. Why would she lie? I exhaled slowly. I don't know yet. But someone told her to. Who? There was a long pause. I already knew the answer. Kyle, I said. Lisa didn't respond immediately. You think her boyfriend did this? Yes. Why? Because he's the father. The silence on the other end became heavy. Lisa finally spoke. Rachel said Kyle didn't know. That's not true, I said. You saw him at dinner. He didn't react. Lisa remembered. I could hear it in her breathing. He just sat there, she whispered. Exactly. Another pause. David. Yes. I'm coming to see you. No, I said. I think you should. Please. Her voice sounded desperate now. I need to talk to you face to face. I didn't answer for a moment. Then I gave her the motel address. Lisa arrived 2 hours later. She looked different. Exhausted. Eyes red from crying. She stood in the doorway of the motel room like someone who wasn't sure they were allowed inside. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked in slowly. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Lisa sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke. I confronted Rachel this morning. And? Lisa wiped her eyes. She broke down. I leaned against the wall. What did she say? Lisa's voice trembled. She said Kyle told her to do it. The words hung in the air. She said his family would destroy him if they found out she was pregnant. They're very religious. Catholic. She said Kyle's mother already hated her. So he needed someone else to blame. And you were, convenient. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger. Something deeper. Convenient, I repeated. Lisa nodded. He promised they would come clean later. When? After the baby was born. I stared at her. She destroyed my life for temporary. Lisa started crying again. I know. I know how terrible this is. You don't, I said quietly. Lisa looked up at me. My entire reputation was destroyed in one night. Your parents called me a predator. Your father threatened me. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I shook my head slowly. Sorry doesn't fix this. Lisa looked down at the floor. What do you want me to say? I studied her face. I want you to tell me something honestly. She nodded. What? Even for 1 second. I paused. Did you believe me? Lisa didn't answer. The silence told me everything. My chest felt hollow. You should go, I said. Lisa's head snapped up. David, please. Go. She stood slowly. Walked toward the door. Then stopped. Rachel is telling our parents the truth tomorrow. About everything. Kyle too. They're ending the lie. I nodded once. Good. Lisa looked at me carefully. What are you going to do? I met her eyes. I'm going to talk to my lawyer. And then? And then I'll decide if I want to stay married to someone. I paused. Who believed I was capable of that? Lisa's eyes filled with tears again. But she didn't argue. She just turned and walked out. The door closed quietly behind her. I sat down slowly. The truth was finally starting to surface. Rachel's lie was collapsing. Kyle's role was exposed. Lisa's family would soon know everything. But something inside me felt colder than before. Because the damage was already done. And apologies don't erase what people choose to believe about you. My phone buzzed. A message from Paul. Call me. I dialed his number. He answered immediately. Good news travels fast, he said. So Rachel confessed. More or less, I replied. Paul was quiet for a moment. Good. But we're not finished yet. What do you mean? Rachel accused you publicly. Your reputation was damaged. Yes. And someone threatened you. The text message. That's evidence too. My stomach tightened. What are you suggesting? Paul's voice became very calm. I'm suggesting we don't just clear your name. We make sure the people who did this. He paused. Never try anything like it again. And that was the moment I realized something important. Rachel's lie might be over. But the consequences were only beginning. The next 2 days were strangely quiet. Too quiet. For almost a week my phone had been full of accusations, threats, silence, and cold messages. Now there was nothing. Just waiting. Rachel was supposed to tell her parents the truth. Kyle's family too. Lisa had said everything would come out. But I had learned something in the last few days. People who create lies don't like admitting them. They delay. They panic. They try to soften the damage. On the third morning my phone finally rang. Unknown number. I answered. David. Lisa's father. His voice sounded completely different. Not angry. Not threatening. Almost nervous. David, we need to talk. I didn't respond immediately. He cleared his throat. Rachel told us everything. I leaned back in the chair. So now you know. Yes, he said quietly. There was a pause. We made a terrible mistake. That sentence would have meant a lot a few days earlier. Now it felt empty. I see, I said. We would like you to come over tonight, he continued. We should sit down as a family and talk this through. Family. The word almost made me laugh. I'm not family anymore, I said calmly. You're still married to our daughter, he replied. For now. Silence hung between us. Finally he said. I understand you're angry. Angry doesn't cover it. Another pause. Then his voice softened. We believed Rachel. She's our daughter. I believed my wife, I replied. And she believed Rachel. That ended the conversation. He didn't have an answer to that. Before hanging up he said one more thing. Rachel is coming clean to everyone tonight. Good. I ended the call. A few minutes later another call came in. Lisa's mother. I let it go to voicemail. Her message came seconds later. Her voice was shaking. David. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have listened. She started crying before the message ended. I deleted it without finishing. Apologies were starting to arrive. But they all came too late. By the afternoon the story had started spreading. Just like the accusation had. Except now the truth was moving through the same channels. Messages. Whispers. Social media. Rachel had posted a statement on Facebook. A long apology. She admitted she lied. Admitted Kyle was the father. Admitted she had blamed me because Kyle was afraid of his family finding out. The post stayed online for exactly 57 minutes. Then she deleted it. But screenshots travel faster than guilt. By evening everyone had seen it. Teachers at my school. Friends. Neighbors. Even people I barely knew. The damage to my reputation had begun to repair itself. Slowly. But something else was happening too. Kyle's life was collapsing. Paul called me that night. I assume you've seen the confession, he said. Yes. Good. What's happening with Kyle? Paul chuckled quietly. His family threw him out yesterday. Apparently his mother was not impressed. Where is he now? Couch surfing with friends. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just a dull sense of inevitability. And Rachel? I asked. She moved back in with her parents. The baby is due in 4 months. I nodded slowly. So the truth is out. Mostly, Paul said. Mostly. There's still the matter of defamation. And the threats you received. The message telling you to stop digging. That came from Kyle's phone. My head lifted. You traced it? Very easily. What does that mean? It means we now have legal leverage. I thought about it for a moment. You want to sue them? Paul didn't hesitate. Yes. For defamation. For reputational damage. For emotional distress. And possibly criminal harassment. That would destroy Rachel completely. Financially. Legally. Her life was already falling apart. But Paul wasn't finished. You don't have to do it, he added. It's your decision. What would you do? I asked. Paul paused. I'm a lawyer. My job is consequences. But this isn't just a legal decision. It's a personal one. I looked around the motel room. The cheap carpet. The buzzing lights. The life I had been forced into overnight. Then I thought about something else. Lisa standing in the doorway. Asking for forgiveness. And not answering my question. Did she believe me? Even for 1 second. Give me a few days, I said. Of course, Paul replied. Before hanging up he said one more thing. Whatever you decide, make sure it brings you peace. I ended the call and sat quietly. The truth was out now. Rachel had confessed. Kyle had been exposed. Lisa's parents had apologized. But none of it changed one simple fact. When my life was destroyed in front of everyone, the person who should have trusted me most had stayed silent. And that silence was something I wasn't sure I could ever forgive. 2 days passed. The noise around the scandal slowly faded. People had short memories when it came to other people's disasters. First they gossip. Then they move on. But I wasn't moving on. Not yet. Because something inside me still felt unfinished. The lie had been exposed. Rachel had confessed. Kyle had been thrown out by his family. Lisa's parents had apologized. But none of that changed the one moment that kept replaying in my head. That dinner table. Rachel pointing at me. Lisa staring at the floor. And saying nothing. That silence had destroyed something. Something that couldn't be rebuilt with apologies. On the third morning I called Paul. "I've made a decision." "I'm listening," he said. "I don't want to sue Rachel." Paul paused. "That's surprising." "Why?" "Because legally you have a strong case." "I know. But she's already destroyed her own life. Her reputation is gone. She's pregnant. Her boyfriend abandoned her. I don't need to ruin her financially too." Paul was quiet for a moment. "And Kyle?" I thought about it. Kyle had started this. Convinced Rachel to lie. Threatened me. Almost destroyed my life. "He's already losing everything," I said. "His family cut him off. He lost his job. He's barely surviving." Paul sighed softly. "You're choosing mercy." "No," I said. "I'm choosing something else." "What's that?" "Closure." Paul seemed satisfied with that answer. "Very well," he said. "But there is one thing you still need to do." "What?" "You need to decide what happens with your marriage." That word felt heavy. Marriage. 6 years. Memories. Plans. And one night that erased everything. "I'm thinking about it," I said. Paul didn't push further. "Take your time." After the call ended I packed my things. The motel room suddenly felt temporary. Because it was. I had signed a lease on a small apartment across town. Nothing special. But it was quiet. Clean. And most importantly, it was mine. Moving took less than an afternoon. A few suitcases. A laptop. Some books. My entire life now fit into the back seat of my car. When I unlocked the apartment door for the first time, the emptiness felt strangely peaceful. No accusations. No whispers. No tension. Just silence. I placed my laptop on the kitchen counter and opened it. There was one final step left. I downloaded the divorce paperwork Paul had sent me earlier that morning. The documents were simple. Direct. Irreversible. 6 years reduced to several pages of legal language. Division of property. Termination of marriage. Signatures. I stared at the papers for a long time. Not because I was uncertain. Because I was remembering. The bookstore where I met Lisa. The first apartment we shared. The trips. The quiet evenings. The promises. All of it had felt real. But love depends on trust. And trust had shattered the moment she chose silence over belief. I printed the papers. Signed my name. And placed them neatly in an envelope. That evening my phone rang. Lisa. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Hello." Her voice sounded tired. "David, can we talk?" "We already did." "I mean really talk." "I've been thinking." "So have I said." "Can we meet?" she asked. There was hesitation in her voice. "Please." I looked at the envelope on the table. "Yes." "Where?" "The apartment." "I'll text you the address." She arrived 40 minutes later. Lisa looked around the empty apartment when she walked in. "You moved?" "Yes." She stepped inside slowly. Her eyes stopped on the envelope on the table. "What's that?" I picked it up. And handed it to her. She opened it. The color drained from her face. "Divorce papers?" "Yes." She looked up at me. "David, no. You heard me." "I said I was sorry," she whispered. "I know. We can fix this." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't make a mistake that night. You made a choice." "I was scared," she said. "She's my sister. And I was your husband." Lisa started crying. Please don't do this. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't get angry. I simply repeated the truth. When it mattered most, you believed her. She looked at the papers again. Her hands were shaking. You're really ending this? Yes. Tears ran down her face. For a moment I thought she might refuse. But then she picked up the pen. And signed. The sound of the pen on paper felt final. She placed it back on the table. And stood there quietly. Then she asked one last question. Do you hate me? I thought about it. No. That answer surprised her. Then why? I met her eyes. Because trust once broken, doesn't come back. Lisa nodded slowly. Then she walked toward the door. And for the second time that week, she left my life behind. A week passed after Lisa signed the papers. The silence in my new apartment no longer felt strange. It felt stable. Predictable. For the first time in weeks, my life was no longer controlled by someone else's lie. The divorce moved faster than I expected. There were no arguments about money. No legal battles. No fights over property. Lisa didn't contest anything. Maybe she knew she had already lost the only thing that mattered. Trust. Paul handled the paperwork quickly. Your case is simple, he told me. No children. No shared property disputes. And both parties signed willingly. Still, news of Rachel's confession kept spreading. The story had started inside one dining room. But by now it had reached far beyond that house. At school, a few teachers quietly approached me. They had heard the rumors earlier. Now they had heard the truth. One of them simply said, I'm glad it worked out. Another apologized for believing the gossip. I nodded politely. But the truth was, people's opinions didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that my name was clear. Rachel, on the other hand, was living inside the consequences of her lie. Paul updated me on the situation during a short phone call. She hasn't left her parents' house in days, he said. Why? I asked. Because everyone knows. Apparently the screenshots of Rachel's confession had traveled everywhere. Friends. Classmates. Co-workers. Even the nursing program she attended. Her school suspended her, Paul added. For lying about a serious accusation. I exhaled slowly. Rachel had tried to destroy my life. Instead she had dismantled her own. And Kyle? I asked. Paul chuckled quietly. Things are not going well for him either. Kyle's car dealership had fired him. Apparently the story had reached his manager. And businesses don't like employees connected to scandals involving accusations like that. His family cut him off completely, Paul said. He's been staying on friends' couches. And those friends are starting to get tired of the drama. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just a strange calm. This wasn't revenge. It was gravity. People fall when they build lies too high. Rachel's parents called again that evening. I let the phone ring for a long time before answering. Her father spoke first. David, we know we don't deserve it, but we'd like to see you. No. His voice sounded tired. Please. There's nothing to talk about. We just want to apologize in person. You already did. There was a long pause. Finally he said. You were a good husband to Lisa. The sentence surprised me. I didn't answer. Rachel understands what she did, he continued. She regrets it. I'm sure she does. Another pause. Is there anything we can do to make this right? The answer came easily. No. Because the truth was simple. Some things cannot be repaired. Some moments cannot be undone. Rachel had chosen to accuse me. Lisa had chosen silence. And those choices had consequences. When the call ended, I walked to the window. The city lights outside were beginning to glow in the evening darkness. My phone buzzed again. A message from Paul. Divorce finalized tomorrow. I stared at the words. 6 years of marriage would officially end in less than 24 hours. Strangely, I didn't feel sadness. Just relief. Because the worst part of this entire story wasn't the accusation. Or the humiliation. Or even the threats. It was the realization that the people closest to you sometimes reveal who they truly are when things fall apart. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. The next morning Paul called again. It's done. Official? Yes. Your marriage is legally over. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat quietly in the kitchen, watching the sunlight move across the floor. Rachel's lie had started everything. But it wasn't the lie that ended my marriage. It was the silence that followed it. And that silence had taught me something important. The people who truly belong in your life don't wait for proof before standing beside you. Everyone else eventually walks away. Or forces you to. Life didn't explode after the divorce. It didn't collapse either. It simply continued. Which is something people rarely talk about. The quiet part after the storm. I went back to work at the high school 2 weeks later. The principal had called me earlier and asked if I needed more time. But I didn't want more time. I wanted normal. Walking back into that building felt strange at first. A few teachers greeted me carefully. Students didn't know the details, only rumors. Teenagers always hear pieces of everything. But the administration had already seen Rachel's confession. The story was no longer about accusation. It was about a lie. And lies eventually lose their power. Classes helped. Routine helped. Standing in front of a classroom and talking about history felt strangely grounding. Because history has a pattern. People make mistakes. Sometimes terrible ones. Then consequences follow. Rachel was learning that pattern the hard way. I heard the updates through people who still spoke with Lisa's family. Rachel had withdrawn from her nursing program. The school didn't expel her officially. But the suspension made returning almost impossible. Friends had stopped calling. The story was too ugly. Too public. Too uncomfortable. Kyle's situation was even worse. Paul told me he had tried to contact him once. Not to threaten him. Just to warn him. Kyle never responded. Apparently he had moved out of town. No one knew exactly where. His old friends stopped mentioning him. And his family had completely shut the door. The lie that had been designed to save him had destroyed him instead. Lisa reached out one more time. Not with a call. Just a letter. Handwritten. It arrived 3 weeks after the divorce. I sat at the kitchen table and read it slowly. She wrote about regret. About fear. About how quickly everything had spiraled. She said she should have defended me. Should have trusted me. Should have known the truth. At the bottom she wrote something that stayed with me. If I had just looked at you for 1 second that night, I would have known you were innocent. Maybe. Maybe not. But that moment was already gone. I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I put it in a drawer. Not to keep the past alive. Just to close it properly. A few days later I ran into Lisa's father at a grocery store. Neither of us expected it. He looked older than I remembered. More tired. He approached slowly. David. I nodded politely. Hello. For a moment he seemed unsure what to say. Then he spoke. I was wrong about you. The apology sounded genuine. I believed him. I know, I said. He looked relieved. I should have listened. Yes. Silence followed. Finally he asked quietly. Are you doing okay? Yes. And that answer was true. For the first time in weeks. I really was. As we stood there in the aisle between shelves of canned food, he said one last thing. You deserved better from all of us. Maybe I did. But sometimes life doesn't give you what you deserve. It gives you clarity instead. And clarity is worth more. Because once you see people clearly, you stop building your future around the wrong ones. I left the store a few minutes later. The evening air was cool. Peaceful. The chaos that had started at that dinner table was finally settling. Rachel was facing the consequences of her lie. Kyle had disappeared. Lisa had lost the marriage she once believed was permanent. And I had lost a life I thought I understood. But I had gained something else. Freedom. Freedom from the people who chose doubt over loyalty. And sometimes, that kind of freedom is the quietest form of justice. 3 months passed. Life slowly rebuilt itself in small, quiet pieces. The apartment started to feel like home. My routine settled again. Work. Evenings. Books. Long walks. Peace returned the way it usually does, quietly. The scandal that once felt enormous gradually faded from people's conversations. Someone else's drama replaced it. That's how the world works. But occasionally the past still brushed against the present. One afternoon I saw Rachel across the street near a pharmacy. She was visibly pregnant now. Her steps were slow. Her shoulders tense. For a moment she noticed me too. Our eyes met. She looked away first. There was no anger in her face anymore. Just something heavy. Regret, maybe. Or the realization that one lie had changed the course of her entire life. I didn't approach her. There was nothing left to say. Some apologies arrive too late to matter. And some wounds close only when distance remains. I kept walking. A few weeks later Paul called again. Not about a case. Just to check in. You sound different, he said. In a good way. I feel different, I replied. Good. Then he asked a question. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Rachel hadn't confessed? I thought about that for a moment. Sometimes. And I think the truth would have surfaced eventually. Why? Paul asked. Because lies need constant support, I said. And eventually someone gets tired of holding them up. Paul laughed quietly. That's a very lawyer-like answer. Maybe. Before hanging up he said one last thing. You handled that situation better than most people would. I didn't feel strong at the time. Strength rarely feels strong while it's happening, he replied. Then the call ended. Later that evening I opened the drawer in my kitchen. The envelope with Lisa's letter was still there. I read it one more time. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just with distance. Then I placed it back in the drawer and closed it. Outside my window the city lights were turning on. Cars moved quietly through the streets. Life continuing. Exactly as it should. Rachel's accusation had taken away a marriage. A home. A future I once believed in. But it also revealed something far more valuable. The truth about the people around me. And once that truth appeared, everything else became much simpler. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need confrontation. I didn't even need apologies. Because the consequences had already arrived on their own. And the people who created the lie were now living inside the reality it built. Meanwhile, I had something much more important. My name. My peace. And a life that was finally mine again. Thank you for listening. Calm justice doesn't shout. It keeps records.